how to fix page with redirect errors in the latest Search Console page indexing reports. As promised to rank your fans, I'm creating new tutorials showing how to fix certain problems in Search Console page indexing reports, as well as best practices so that your website is better maintained and gets better ranking in Google. Page with redirect errors are basically saying to Google, you know what, Google? We have submitted our sitemap to you, but those URLs within the sitemap, when you try and access it, you're being redirected elsewhere. So therefore, Google's getting confused. That's very important to understand. A URL that you submit in Search Console is very important. That means you need to submit the correct URLs. URLs that you want to see rank in Google. You want Google to show those URLs to its searchers. So therefore, first thing to do when you look at any errors in Search Console is you need to make sure the URLs in the sitemaps do not have any problems. And they are the only one version of a URL that you want Google to index. Because even a / in the URL portion, if any links on a website has incorrect URL structure, then page indexing reports tells you what they are, and page with redirect is one of them. So, as always, first thing to do is with Search Console, don't look at all known pages, because Google is an efficient search engine. It will come across all sorts of URL structure on internet. That means it may know of different URLs, different structure, some with www, some broken URLs, and so on. So therefore, to remedy any problems in Search Console, page indexing report, look at all submitted pages, because now you're looking at reports that come from the URLs that you told Google to crawl and index. And if they have any problems, then obviously you need to fix them. So in my example, when I select all submitted pages, I don't have page with redirect issues, because the sitemap that I've submitted, they're working correct. The URL structure on my sitemap is correct. URL structure on my website is set up correctly. What that means is, let's take this scenario, let's take this example. As you can see in this URL, I'll zoom in and that you see. If Google finds URLs on internet, whether it's on my website or elsewhere, without www, then if my website is set up to use www version, then page indexing reports are your friend telling you, you know what, there is some discrepancy between URL structure that Google is aware of. That's what page redirect can be thought of. That means if someone was to request this URL without the www, let's go and see what happens. Let's refresh and look what happened. It has redirected to www. Let's also take a look at this example. Let's remove that / from the URL structure. Let's remove it. And now, let's open up a new tab and visit that URL without the /. Now, as you can see, that has been redirected to the URL structure that my website uses. So, once we understand that, then we can look at page indexing reports page with redirect issues. Let's press on it. Here Google is saying, okay, when we look at the URLs that we have found for the web property that you have verified in Search Console, here are the sample URLs that when we're trying to visit this URL, it's taking us elsewhere. So what's the problem there? Make sense? That's what Search Console is telling you. Saying, you know what, triple check these URLs because these URLs are being redirected elsewhere. And then you have to ask yourself, okay, are you aware of it? If so, okay. That could be you have set up redirection on a site-wide. You have updated your entire website, so you may have missed setting up the URLs correctly. So that could be the case. That's why Google Search Console is your website's friend. So looking at these examples, then you can say, okay, you know what? Am I aware of these URLs? Should there be redirection happening? Are you using plugins for redirection? Because there are many plugins that a person may be, a website owner may be using, and things there may be set up incorrectly. If so, you need to double check them. Does the redirection happening correctly? Because that could happen. Page with redirect problems can occur because of incorrectly set up . Now, to avoid many Search Console problems and to tell Google about a website is you should use just one structure, whether it's without the / without / if you're using PHP, then everything should be set up correctly and be consistent throughout your entire website. Always check your XML sitemaps to say, okay, are these the correct URLs? Am I missing a / in the URL portion? Does the redirection happen correctly? Is my internal linking structure set up correctly? Am I using redirection plugins? If so, am I doing the redirection correctly? So then, let's take a look at this example. Let's press on the URL. Google Search Console gives us tools to analyze a website. Now let's press on test robots.txt blocking to see what happens. Because we're looking at a domain property here. That means rankia.com, it's a verified domain property. That means I should not be able to use this tool now. As you can see, property not in your account. So I won't cover that because I've just created a video tutorial showing what that is all about and how to remedy it, okay? So now, for me to analyze this using robots.txt, I have to switch back to a different property, which is the same website, using URL prefix. I know this may be confusing, but some Rankia followers may actually encounter this issue as well. So now let me switch back to the URL prefix. So that's a different property. Let's look at page with redirect issues here. Let's look at that example. Now let's test with robots.txt tester to say, okay, can Google access those URLs that is having page with redirect issues? And as we can see, this particular URL, when I test it, Google is allowed. Let me check Google Images. Let's test that. Here it says, you know what? This rule is allowing Google image search engine as well. Let's imagine you have news type of website. Let's test. No, Google is allowed. So now doing this test, I know page with redirect issues is not caused by robots.txt file that each website can utilize. Robots.txt. Rank Your YouTube channel has videos showing you how to create a simple one. So the rules within this file may block Google to access certain parts of a website. Therefore, testing a website using this tester is a smart way to remedy page indexing problems as well. So now I'm going to revert back to my website using domain verification method. That's a domain property. Let me press on page with redirect. And now let me press on the example URL. And now Google Search Console gives us another tool. It's inspect URL. Let's press on that. Now this is a new feature in Google Search Console compared to the other one. What this tells us is, you know what? Here are the referring pages. That means this particular page that is having redirection problem, Google has found that on these URLs. Thus, it is called referring page. That means what you need to do is go and visit that particular URL that has referred Google to the problem URL. And here, what you need to do, obviously, is double check to see if that URL is still on that page. So on our keyboard, we can press on Ctrl U on our keyboard to bring out the web developer toolbar. Then we can press Ctrl F, Ctrl V to paste that URL. Now let me search within the source code to see if that link is still on this web page. Because if it is, then obviously that needs to be updated. Makes sense? So this page, let's go and visit to see what happens. Let's actually go and visit the page itself. It has been redirected. That's what page with redirect is all about. Saying to Google, okay, we are aware of a URL, but when we visit it, it takes us somewhere else. Now, if it's a URL that you have submitted in your XML sitemap, then that's a problem that must be fixed. So now let's go and see this URL, because Google has been referred from this URL. Now we need to do the same thing. Press on Ctrl U on our keyboard. We can press Ctrl F and then search within the source code to see if that URL is still there. That's what you need to do. Look at the referring pages to ask yourself, is that URL still there? If so, you need to update it. That's what page with redirect problem is telling us. Make sense? It's telling us there is a URL that takes Google elsewhere and it's still on your website. So why is that? Make sense? That's why it's important. That's why Google Search Console is your website's friend. Because without fixing these page indexing problems, your website is losing Google rankings. Because Google is getting confused. That means your website is set up incorrectly. You need to set it up correctly. Now we can inspect the URL. Obviously, URL inspection tool is your friend. You can press on test live URL. Let's actually press that as well. Okay, while that live test is happening, remember what we're testing. We're testing page with redirect problem URL. That's what Google is testing. Now it's saying, you know what? This URL is available to Google, but page can be indexed. And here it says request indexing. Now, in this example, it would be absolutely not smart for me to request indexing. How can I request indexing of a URL that goes elsewhere? That means this URL doesn't exist on internet. So how can it be indexed by Google? So now it says URL is available to Google, request indexing. No, it's not possible. Unless it is fixed, you cannot request indexing because Google cannot index this URL. That's why page with redirect problem is important for you to remedy for your website because it's set up incorrectly. Now, how do you remedy it? As I've said to you in this video tutorial, first, look at all submitted pages. That's the first thing to do. Second, if you end up seeing page with redirect for the URLs you've submitted in your XML sitemap, then obviously next thing to do is test the URLs in your sitemap by asking yourself, okay, is the URL structure correct? Is there any problems here? Because that could happen. Is your website that you've submitted to Search Console, does it have www or it does not have www? Is there / issues? So looking at your XML sitemap, these URLs, when you visit, it should not have any redirection problems, right? You need to triple check your XML sitemaps. This is the next step. Then you test, let's go back, page with indexing. Let's look at page with redirect URLs. Let's look at a sample. Let's inspect the URL. So that's the next step. And then look at the referring pages. And then here, make sure you update the page with redirect URLs from the referring pages. Referring pages should not have URLs going to a page that is redirected. Let me repeat that again. Referring pages that has the link to the URL that has redirection occurring, they must be updated. Another way is you can actually say to yourself, okay, if you're using popular content management systems such as WordPress, you can download your blog posts or pages or product URLs locally and then open that file up. You don't have to use Dreamweaver, you can use Notepad++ or simple Notepad. Let's open with Notepad. And within this, because you have downloaded that file, you can search for that URL. Google Search Console is complaining. So you can edit, you can say find, search for that URL within this document. As we can see, I have exported my posts and there is this URL lingering on my website. So now let me find next. On this URL there is, on this exported blog posts, there is one URL. So now I have to ask myself, why is that? Why is that on my website still? Because Google, being highly efficient, it may actually see that. Because if it's somewhere on my content management system, maybe Google can see it. So these are the tests that you need to do. I know it can be cumbersome, to remedy Search Console issues at times, but nonetheless they are important to triple check and remedy. So now let me quickly wrap it up. First thing to do, when you want to fix page with redirect problems, look at all submitted pages. Although you can conduct other tests, such as look at the sitemaps, I rather just focus on this because I don't want to cover this confusing you. All submitted pages basically means your XML sitemaps, they're the submitted pages. So now when you look at all submitted pages and you do see page with redirect problem, then you must fix them because you have submitted those pages, but Google is having redirection problem. Okay, so I haven't got any, so I don't have to do anything at this moment. I don't have to validate it. I don't have to do nothing because I have triple checked everything. And I know for a fact, for this particular property, there is no problems that is causing ranking drops. So I can actually remove, not even start validation. Because if I validate this, then next month I'm going to see the same problem again. The reason I'm going to see the same problem again, because they are not problem per se in my scenario. Because all this URL is correct. My sitemap URLs are correct. Redirection is happening correctly, so there is no problems on my end. Because all known pages is different compared to all submitted pages. So there is no submitted pages that is having page with redirect problem. That means I can just ignore the problem. Once again, if all submitted pages has page with redirect issues for your website, you must fix it. Or else you're losing Google rankings. That means you're losing website traffic. Then you check your sitemap, then example URLs, inspect the URL. That's the next part. Look at the referring pages. Visit them to see if those URLs are still there. If so, if it's still there, update them to go to the correct URLs that is in your sitemap. Then to conduct a maintenance on an entire website, if you can export it from your dashboard, export your entire website and look for those problem URLs. And if they're within the website somewhere, then you need to update that URL. In my scenario, let me give you just this example. Let's say my website had this URL somewhere. How do I then fix it? Let's go and visit to see where it goes. Well, it goes here. That means I just delete the old one and make sure it goes to the correct one. Because next time Google visits the referring pages, it's not going to see the problem URL. It's going to see the updated URL. I know if you're not experienced website owner, although I try to make the tutorials as simple as possible, the problems with Search Console page with redirect can occur for various different reasons. Rewatch this video if you must, but one way or another, the new page indexing report, page with redirect issues for all submitted pages must be fixed, whether by you or you hire someone who's experienced. In fact, while here, let me try to perhaps offer a service to you. Rankia has updated its services for the Australian website, so you can easily visit this URL and place a custom code, and I can double check your website. If you would like to see Google Search Console related tutorials, please do give this video a like. Also, if you would like to support Rankia, perhaps a private course, which is the masterclass, will definitely be a great investment for growing your website, as in growing your business website, because I share with you different methods as well. And I'll talk with you in the next video session.